Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, my guest today is Angus Thirlwell, the Cocoa King and co-founder of Hotel Chocolat. Behind this high street high flyer is a veritable pick and mix of shops, restaurants, books, cocoa plantations, a hotel and even a school of chocolate right here in the heart of London in Covent Garden. And the AIM market has developed a sweet tooth for Hotel Chocolat, which is one of its star-listed players. All this from an entrepreneur with sugar in the blood. His dad invented none other than Mr. Whippy. Angus, a very warm welcome to the show. Now, you've described yourself as an evangelist for chocolate. Do some evangelizing for us on why chocolate, why the chocolate business.
Well, the secret weapon, of course, is the cocoa, which has a profound effect on the human body and the human spirit. So first of all, when you eat chocolate, you've got to make sure that it has a high proportion of cocoa in there and a restrained amount of sugar. And the cocoa starts by...
So the cocoa is the magic?
Cocoa is most definitely the magic. And it starts by enlarging the blood vessel system, so you really feel a sense of empowerment. And then it plays on your mind. It releases serotonin, which just makes you feel ridiculously happy and pleased with the world.
But I mean, you're evangelical about chocolate. Couldn't it have been football or something else a bit more healthy, perhaps?
Well, there's loads of good things in the world, yes, there's no doubt about that, and there's no monopoly just on cocoa and chocolate. But we felt that in the UK, chocolate had become deadly boring about 20 years ago, and there's a bit of a job to be done to regain our national pride, because our chocolate was seen as the worst in the world, full stop.
So it was a brand Britain job. I mean,
well, it wasn't really our motivation for doing it, but we felt there was a huge gap in the market to tap back into the excitement of proper chocolate.
It's a very French-sounding name, Hotel Chocolat. We might have thought that it was from Paris or even perhaps Switzerland, but in fact you got started in none other than Watford.
Exactly.
And you said if you can make it in Watford, you can make it anywhere. Tell us, what was the Watford lesson? What was the Watford secret, if you like?
Well, the Watford secret was really finding a proper test out for our physical store format. So we already had the brand name, and what we needed to find out was, would it resonate with a slice of the British population? So after much research...
So it was a test market?
It was, well, the Watford store still does very well. It's still open today, and we love it, and it's growing. So it was an ongoing test, but it was intended to be neither too posh nor too gritty. It was meant to be just a slice of the British population. We wanted to appeal to everybody. That was essential to us. And
what were they buying it for? Was it for romance? Was it business presence? What was the basic punter after in the Watford store?
Well, the first group of people, as I recall it, who went in, we had a group of elderly ladies, and then some school children, and then a couple of businessmen. I mean, it was literally the broadest church you could ever hope for. And that's the thing that we found from being an online business to being multi-channel. Physical locations give you a much broader customer base.
Were you working in the store in those days?
I might have been lurking around the back, yes.
So you were seeing how it was developing. And did you have any inkling that you were going to be onto something that might well really take off in the way that the business clearly has?
We hoped it might work, yes, and we've always liked to do things that have some, building potential. We didn't want to just end up with, one or two shops. This was intended to be, something that would go across, on a wide plane.
But you really get a sense that Hotel Chocolat is a brand with a bit of X factor. There's something special about it. It's a sort of brand you hear a lot about for special occasions. It's seen as a brand doing really well. If you were to look at that X factor, the ingredients behind what makes it successful, what would you point us to?
I think it's coming back to the hotel bit, which is intended to plant the idea that there's a sense of escapism about our brand and about consuming our chocolate. So when it melts in your mouth, it's transporting you to somewhere beyond just the immediate vicinity. It's taking you to wherever you want to go.
I can't let you get away with an advertisement, but I mean, it sounds fantastic. And there is a Hotel Chocolat, isn't there? There's actually
well, of course, and in the build-up to launching the brand name, I had to explain to our team why we'd picked that name. And the first question was always, we're not having hotels though, are we, surely? And I always said, no, this is purely metaphorical. And no sooner than the words are out of my mouth, and of course fate conspired that we bought a cocoa estate. The cocoa estate was so beautiful, we wanted to bring our customers there. Of course, we had to put them up somewhere nice, and then we had to build a hotel.
And the dream continues, because you opened your own plantation in St. Lucia, I believe. I mean, was that a big part of the positioning, or was it just a kind of founder's fancy?
The idea came from one of our customers who completely off her own bat and with no agenda. I'd never met her before, just sent me this lovely old book from 1920, and it was all about cocoa plantations in the 1920s, and it illustrated the tight connection at that time between cocoa agriculture and chocolate luxury. And it instilled in me a desire to bring those worlds together again for everybody's benefit, the consumer, the cocoa growers, and in doing it, it would make us a much stronger brand.
And you've created a real tribe, right? I mean, 100,000 customer tasters. You've even raised finances out of the customers with the chocolate bond, haven't you? In terms
yes,
of
we have.
So in terms of what gives that kind of connection with the customer, what would you put that down to?
Well, from the beginning, we decided that we wanted to have a direct connection with our own customers. So we didn't take the normal route, which is to try and get a listing in one of the traditional supermarkets. We laboriously built up an online model, and then after a few years of trying to make that work, we then opened our first store in Watford, and that was all about getting eyeball to eyeball, taste bud to taste bud with our customers, really understanding them, how to make them happy, how to keep them loyal. And I think that was the foundation stone.
And do they do the marketing for you? Are they a kind of word of mouth asset for the business?
Hugely, yes.
So how does that work? I mean,
you can't contain that. I mean, I'm the first one to get sackfuls of mail or bad scores from our tasting club who rate.
What's the worst feedback you've ever had?
It was for a chocolate which was flavoured with thyme, the herb thyme. Right. And even my father-in-law wrote in to give me a savage end of his tongue on that one.
And how do you respond to that? Does the thyme chocolate still exist? Or
no. Anything that gets a low score ends up on the chocolatier's floor and is never heard of again. We have so many good recipes that we have to be quite disciplined in, listening to the scores of our members, and if they don't like it, we'll go back to the drawing board.
And as you move on, I mean, innovation is a big part of your story in terms of recipes and things like that. I mean, how do you keep that recipe fresh?
I think just by working with a group of people that are fun, that embrace risk taking. My biggest job really is to protect the fragile culture of Hotel Chocolat. And as long as our culture is right, we will recruit and retain the right people. We'll recruit and retain the right customers. And you can't bottle that. It has to be a living thing.
So the team really matters as well.
Yes, having very firm and clear brand values and actually living by those, even if it's inconvenient, even if it costs you a lot of money to do things that are, not good short term, but good medium or long term. You have to live by those brand values.
But you're also a partnership. You're a co-founder with Peter Harris. Now, I'd just like to read you two very quick descriptors: emotional, excited about concepts; sober, discerning, rational. Which one's which?
Well, it's normally Peter, of course, but when we were...
What, he's the sober one?
He's the sober one, yes, of course.
Oh.
But when he's a chartered accountant, but he's an entrepreneur as well. And when we were looking to evaluate whether it was a good idea to actually buy a cocoa estate on the other side of the planet with no previous history in agriculture, Peter was the one who got the most excited, having been dragged over there, I must admit. Grabbed me by the elbow and said, "Look, Angus, we've got to buy this place right now."
And what's the secret of a good partnership?
Respect and humour.
I mean, it's once been described that partnerships are the worst ships to sail the sea. I mean, have you got a successful boat at Hotel Chocolat?
I think partnerships are great. I mean, in times of adversity where you've got to dig deep, having somebody else to talk to crack a black joke with, it makes all the difference. And Peter and I have been business partners for several decades, and it's rooted in respect and humour. And
a very successful do as well. I mean, do you think that's been an important influence on your career?
I think so, yes. And Peter's father was unfortunately not with us anymore, but a very, very inspirational guy and had the best book of jokes I've ever heard.
But what's
Very
it like
good.
being the son of Mr. Whippy?
Well, it's creates a certain amount of good pressure. In our household when I was growing up, we were always talking about things to do with business, things to do with food, and he made business look
So it
exciting.
created the culture for you.
I think there was a lot of rub-off there, yes.
And if you were to sort of think about the lessons you specifically learned from having that kind of entrepreneurial background, just very quickly, if you point us to something that you would take away from that.
I think if you can be lucky enough to align your own personal interests with what you end up doing, you can't fail. That's really the secret. Don't force yourself to do something that you don't like if you're going to be an entrepreneur.
So do what you love.
It's got to be, yeah, and it's an old maxim, but I've seen it go the wrong way, but I've never seen that particular maxim fail to work.
Angus, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to turn to the break. Now, we've been talking about the business of chocolate and the business of starting up. Next, I want to talk about scaling up and what's next for you, next for the business, and next for London. See you in a moment. Welcome back. This is the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. My guest today is master chocolatier and company founder Angus Thirlwell. Before the break, we spoke about what got Hotel Chocolat going. Now let's turn to its future. What's coming up next? Now, I want to just read to you another little quote, if I may. We want consumers to be having the same debate about the flavours of different cocoa beans as wine. Can you really do that with a commodity like chocolate?
Absolutely.
It's not like a great Burgundy, is it?
I mean, it's better than a great Burgundy. I mean, the flavours of the cocoa bean are nuanced by exactly the same things as the wine grapes. So the terroir, the skill of the grower, fermentation happens with the cocoa bean. Hardly anybody knows that. And so I think wine is up here, coffee's here, and cocoa and chocolate is still in the foothills of actually...
So it's there to be discovered. So if you think it's all about high street, mass market stuff we haven't yet lived in terms of an experience?
Well, I'd go as far as to say that if you flip over the back of a chocolate bar and the number one ingredient is not cocoa, then it shouldn't be called chocolate.
Right.
We'll have to find another vocabulary to describe that, but it's effectively something made of sugar masquerading as chocolate.
Now, that evangelising about cocoa and about its sort of health effects, its sort of, I guess, well-being effects, that's been part of the magic of the message, and it's taken you to the AIM markets, the AIM listing, if you like, in terms of, I think you listed just before Brexit.
We did.
Good timing there, but you've done very well. Tell us a little bit about the experience of going on to AIM.
It was interesting and great to get an analysis of our strategy and our brand and our direction from a group of very well-informed people. I'm talking about city investors here, who literally see the best brands on the planet walking in and out of their office.
But do they get the nuances of cocoa?
They certainly did after we left, yeah.
Maybe they get the figures.
Well, you can't really claim to have a successful model if you're not also delivering the results. And we've never gone in for short-termism, and our mission in those sessions was to explain where we were taking Hotel Chocolat for the medium to long run, and they got it.
And they responded to the passion.
Yes.
And I mean, they've invested
Yep.
well in that business. I mean, it's done very well on the markets. I mean, if you were to talk about what you've learned about yourself as an entrepreneur and a business leader, what are the key things about being listed that you've learned as compared to when it was your own business?
I haven't changed a massive amount, to be honest, and I think that was one of the acid tests that we wanted to find out. So prior to deciding to list, we had some meetings with potential cornerstone investors, and it was really a read on both sides. So we wanted to know that there was an appetite out there in the city to invest in companies like Hotel Chocolat, but also we gave it to them with both barrels. We didn't try to change the way we talk about the company.
Well, even when you're talking to a conservative pension fund or an analyst, you can be yourself, can you?
Well, you have to be, because I think in a highly competitive landscape, if you're claiming to be the specialist in your field, there's got to be an element of extremism in there. Otherwise, your best customers will end up being more informed, more passionate, and better at doing what you're supposed to do.
And when you give up equity in this way, do you feel any less the owner because of it, or does it create something new and different for you?
Well, we've given up a third of the equity, and Peter and I still retain 2/3. I didn't know how he would feel after we did that, to be honest.
And how do you feel?
I feel really good about it, because I feel like the brand has taken wings. It's enabled us to empower and incentivize a large raft of our company team.
And does that help keep them in place? Does that help build the loyalty that they are also owners?
Yeah, yes, it does, and in a lot of cases it rewards them for helping us to build Hotel Chocolat for what it's become and what it's going to become.
And in terms of how you keep the marathon going, I mean, this is the never-ending race. Now you're a sort of listed company. What keeps the stamina at peak?
I don't think being listed has changed our approach to that. We're definitely in this for the long run, and the moment that I don't enjoy getting up in the morning and thinking about Hotel Chocolat, what we can do next, then I'll know it's time to gradually start backing out of the business. But we're in the most exciting era of the business so far, and I can only see it getting more exciting.
I mean, have you had that moment that a lot of CEOs have, where they'll lament the market because relatively small trades lead to big volatility in the share price? Have you seen any of that?
We've seen spiky volatility on a week by week basis. But if you take it across a month at a time, or in our case a year, and you draw a line, it's doubled in its first year, and we're really happy with that. That's a good indicator of the performance that we've delivered and the support we're having from the city, notwithstanding the slight lack of liquidity from listing a third of the company.
Now, I'm going to take you away from your listing.
Yep.
Send me to prison for the hazelnuts. It's worth it. Your own comments about dealing with the European Union, no less. How do you feel about Britain and Brexit, and were the hazelnut lovers right to vote out?
I like every businessman, I think we've made our bed, and we have to then lie in it now and make the best of the opportunities.
So just to explain, you put too many hazelnuts in one of your chocolate bars and you got your knuckles wrapped?
Not yet. There's a very prescribed rule for a product called the gianduja, which is the queen of pralines. It's the smoothest, silkiest type of praline, which is hazelnuts plus chocolate. And there's a lower and an upper limit.
Right.
We always try to use as little sugar as possible, so we whacked in loads of cocoa and loads of hazelnuts and breached those.
But you breached those,
limits.
and so just give us a sense of actually working with the European Union. Did it make you more or less likely to be a Remainer or a Brexiteer?
It was a bit of fun, really. I mean, I'm expecting a knock on the door in a hazelnut-induced dawn raid any moment, but hasn't come yet.
Where are you hiding the nuts?
So we actually call that chocolate illegal gianduja.
But how does it make you feel about the decision that the nation's taken?
It's really irrelevant, our ingredients versus something as huge as that.
So you're ambivalent?
I'm ambivalent about it. I think there's as many opportunities ahead as downsides now. Now we're at the stage.
And how do you feel about a city like London right now?
I think London's an amazing world city full of talent and vivacity, and we will always.
But it wanted
prosper.
to stay in, right? It wanted to remain.
Well, I think the ability to adapt and just get on with it has always been part of our history, and I can see ahead that people are racking their brains, they're beginning to think their way through things, and we're seeing the type of spirit that made London great in the first place coming through. So I prefer to think on the positive side always. And my job is to motivate our team, keep driving the performance of Hotel Chocolat. So I'm the last person that should be a doom monger. I think our role is to keep people happy with delicious chocolates and keep them empowered to perform well.
And that goal of making people really happy, I mean, do you ever sort of worry about the health side effects of the relationship between people and chocolate? I mean, there is a obesity epidemic in this country. There are scares about sugar. I mean, you're part of an industry that has a major reputation issue to deal with, and in fact actions to take, of course.
Yes, there's no doubt about that, but I think the real risk is with stealth sugar. You don't expect to find sugar in your tomato soup or your tomato ketchup, whereas when you're enjoying a chocolate, you do expect some sugar to be in there. Notwithstanding that, I firmly believe it should not be at the levels that it is at the moment.
And is that a job for government to legislate?
No,
or?
it isn't. I don't think the government should be micro-tinkering and those sort of issues. I think it's about
So how do
educating.
they do it? How do these massive chocolate conglomerates and, as you say, the stealth sugar providers, how do they help us off the habit?
It's the consumer power that's going to change it. There's companies like ours, like other startups in London and early pioneers of real chocolate who are trying to, through the better flavours and taste and the way it makes you feel, are getting people to switch to a smaller amount of proper chocolate rather than a bucket full of, sugar-stuffed cheap stuff.
So chocolate done the right way is healthy?
Yes, it absolutely is. As part of a balanced diet, some cocoa-rich, cocoa-led chocolate, my firm belief and understanding is that it is good for you.
Now, a lot of people will be watching this show, will be entrepreneurs themselves thinking about growing their business. If you were to give some advice about what you've learned along the way with your business, what would be the key piece of takeaway, the nugget, if you will, that you'd give to them?
If you're an entrepreneur, I'd say the most important thing is to get started as young as you can. There's no doubt that people become more risk averse as they get older. There's never a convenient time. You might be, your partner might be changing jobs as well, or you might be having a family or whatever. But just get started.
Just get started.
It's messy, and the most important thing is to get on the growth trajectory and start adapting.
So get started somewhere. Now you describe yourself as having a rebellious streak. Is it a good time to be a rebel?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, times of change in the economy, times of change in outlook and circumstances are exactly the time when opportunities open up for aspiring entrepreneurs.
And do you feel disruption is going to be a big part of our future?
Yes, it's got to be.
Angus Thirlwell, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it right there now. Well, that's all we have time for. And a big thank you to my guest this week, Angus Thirlwell. I hope you've enjoyed this hot chocolate chat. And if you have, I look forward to seeing you again for the next Capital Conversation.